Sudan's warring generals say they are willing to negotiate at talks in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. says that Russia has suffered huge losses in Ukraine, including 20,000 killed in just 5 months. For the first time, a Palestinian in Israeli custody has died while on hunger strike.
Mayday mayhem in France as violent clashes leave more than 100 police officers injured and hundreds of protest marchers arrested.
Fighting appears to have intensified in Sudan's capital, with the sound of gunfire echoing across the city and thick black smoke billowing into the sky. A UN convoy says Sudan's warring generals have reportedly agreed to send representatives for negotiations, potentially in Saudi Arabia. The World Food Programme has lifted a temporary suspension of operations in Sudan as the fighting between rival military groups pushes millions into hunger. Food distribution is expected to begin again, but only in locations where humanitarian access is assured. There are warnings of a major humanitarian crisis in Sudan as people trapped by the fighting run out of food and fresh water. The UN is sending its top aid official to try and coordinate relief efforts. And while thousands of foreign nationals have been evacuated, tens of thousands of Sudanese try to cross any border they can reach. They're fleeing into neighboring countries, including Egypt, Chad, and the Central African Republic. The UN says it's bracing for the possibility of more than 800,000 people seeking safety. These Ukrainian soldiers are on trench-digging detail near Bakhmut. Troops are under almost constant Russian shelling, but the U.S. says Moscow's Bakhmut offensive has stalled and failed. The White House estimates that Russia's military has suffered huge losses in the last 5 months for fighting Ukraine in this region.
But just since December, we estimate that Russia has suffered more than 100,000 casualties, including over 20,000 killed in action, nearly half of whom were Wagner soldiers, the majority of whom were Russian convicts that were thrown into combat in Bakhmut without sufficient combat combat training, combat leadership, or any sense of organizational command and control.
Russian authorities in the region of Bryansk bordering Ukraine are on the hunt for those responsible for blowing up a section of railway track which derailed a Russian freight train. There's no immediate indication who set off the explosive, but Bryansk has suffered sporadic cross-border shelling during what the Kremlin still calls a special military operation in Ukraine. Elsewhere in Russia, people in St. Petersburg have been laying flowers in the monument for Ukrainian writer Taras Shevchenko, in memory of Ukrainians that have been killed by Russian missile strikes since last Friday in the regions of Uman, Kyiv, and the Dnipro. A high-profile Palestinian prisoner has died in Israeli custody after more than 80 days on a hunger strike. Kader Adnan, a leader in the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group, had been starving himself since his detention in February. This is the first time a Palestinian has died on hunger strike while in Israeli custody. Shortly after the 45-year-old's death was announced, rockets were fired from Gaza City towards Israel. Islamic Jihad had warned of retaliation if Adnan died. Palestinian groups have also called for a general strike, and protests are likely to follow.
Mayhem on Mayday. Arsonists targeted a building site near a protest march in Paris. The thick black smoke billowing above the crowd, a sign, say the police, of as many as 2,000 criminal agitators whipping up violence. The Ministry of Interior says 108 police officers across France were injured and 291 protesters were arrested. The police used tear gas and water cannon in a number of cities across the country. The Prime Minister, Elizabeth Bourne, described the riotous behaviour as unacceptable. The confrontation also drew attention away from the main focus of the Midday marchers. Hundreds of thousands of workers, urged by their unions, were protesting at pension reforms pushed through Parliament by the government, a decision that has left many peaceful marchers furious.
C'est important de dire qu'on n'est pas d'accord, de continuer à le dire, de le répéter.
Jusqu'au retrait, oui, je lâcherai pas.
C'est une réforme qui est vraiment impopulaire et ils l'ont fait passer de force et c'est tellement insulter la démocratie, insulter le peuple français.
Je pense que tout le monde en a marre de voir la déconnexion avec laquelle le gouvernement nous traite.
Although French workers may not be in the mood for giving in on pensions, the government insists on pushing ahead. On May Day, people across Europe protested against inflation and demanded economic justice. In Spain, there were more than 70 marchers led by powerful trade unions, with one demand standing out above all others.
En este 1 de mayo en concreto, lo que reivindicamos son unos sueldos dignos y además que se conserve con respecto a la inflación el salario.
A demand that was surely shared by the more than 10,000 people who demonstrated in the centre of Athens, the march taking place against the backdrop of the general election campaign, with a vote due on May the 21st. In Berlin, more than 4,000 people took part in the march to celebrate Workers' Day and to demand fairer pay from companies and governments.
Auszuruhen, sondern es ist ein Tag, darauf aufmerksam zu machen, dass es halt nicht richtig läuft in unserer Gesellschaft, wie unfair unsere Ressourcen verteilt ist, wie sehr Menschen bevorteilt oder eben benachteiligt werden und das ist nicht fair. Und das Mindeste, was ich tun kann, ist ja aufzustehen und mich hier hinzustellen und sagen, hey, das ist nicht fair.
In Russia, the war in Ukraine has overshadowed the celebrations. Far from the large demonstrations of the past, only a handful of communist nostalgics took to the streets to commemorate May Day.
The Turkish presidential elections are just 2 weeks away, and after reports of a health scare, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is back on the main stage and facing the most hotly contested race of his tenure. Early polls show the two main candidates are neck and neck. The current head of state in power for the last 20 years faces rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu from the secular and Social Democratic People's Republican Party. Both attended huge rallies this Sunday. In the capital Ankara, Erdogan promised that with God's help he would destroy the opposition. Erdogan, who was Prime Minister from 2003 to 2014 and President since then, faces a competitor who is trying to captivate the young electorate. In all, 5.2 million youths are eligible to vote for the first time, a generation hungry for change. However, only 1/5 of 18 to 25-year-olds are expected to vote. Kılıçdaroğlu leads a six-party coalition and has vowed to, quote, bring back the light to Turkey and rebuild Turkish democracy.
In a bid to get more people to use public transport, Germany has launched a €49 monthly pass for urban and regional travel. From Monday, people will be able to use it on trains, trams, buses, the metro, and even ferries. Authorities hope to attract an extra 5 to 6 million subscribers to public networks.
Ich kenne viele, die das haben und das sehr feiern.
Ich werde das jetzt beantragen, einfach weil es eine super Möglichkeit ist, auch für junge Leute.
The ticket is available via smartphone app or as a chip card. However, prices are expected to be increased gradually. The new offer follows on from the highly successful €9 ticket that ran for a 3-month period last summer, with sales topping 50 million. Germany isn't the first country to launch this kind of initiative. A similar drive to reduce private car use has been even more effective in Luxembourg, where public transport was made free of charge 3 years ago. However, the pass's success is not guaranteed, as some highlighted that many commuters who live far from the city centre don't have the rail infrastructure that could replace the car.
The city of Liverpool, famous for its music, football and friendly people. Known affectionately as Scousers, they can't wait to host Europeans attending the Eurovision Song Contest.
I'd say the city's bouncing, to be honest with you. They're really looking forward to it. You can see everywhere you go, there's signs of Eurovision. Everyone's you know, pepped up for it and that, so it'll be good.
Liverpool's the home of music. It really is the home from way back when in the 50s, 60s, right up to now.
That's going to bring a lot of money into the city, you know, the wholesale business, the pub game, even the taxis, and you know, it's going to be brilliant for the city.
For these two Ukrainian families, Liverpool is now home. Refugees whose country won the Eurovision Song Contest last year.
I think it's quite fair because UK helped Ukraine a lot.
Eurovision enthusiasts have already begun arriving to experience the build-up to what's expected to be the biggest Eurovision takeover a host city has ever staged. As some wait in line for their opportunity to potentially win tickets to the prized event.
It's anticipated that Eurovision will inject £25 million into the economy here on Merseyside, and that beyond that there'll be a 5% increase in terms of the number of European tourists coming to this city every year.
Inside the arena at Liverpool's famous Albert Dock, the set has been designed to the theme of togetherness, celebration and community, with the soundtrack to this year's event written by Ukrainian composer Michael Nekrasov.
We see that the whole city is in a Eurovision mode, totally. All the restaurants, all the bars, like, are totally living it. And we can't wait to experience more things from the city as the Eurovision unfolds.
It's one of my dreams to be in England, and it's really amazing that we are here in the city of music, in the city of everything happened in the past, and we are going to celebrate the Eurovision Song Contest here in the UK.
A song contest which should be taking place in Ukraine, but Liverpool has stepped in as a substitute, and Scousers plan to do Ukrainians proud. Luke Hanrahan, Euronews, Liverpool.